Torch is the code name for the invasion of North and Northwest Africa by British and American forces, which began on November 8, 1942. General Dwight D. Eisenhower commanded the Allied ground, naval, and air forces which participated in this operation. The American and British governments decided against an assault on German forces in France in 1942, but knew they must engage Germany somewhere in order to relieve pressure on Russia, which was then locked in a life-and-death struggle with massive German armies deep in Russian territory. Thus, Operation Torch was conceived and approved.
Hey everybody, Bob from the Board Game Rundown, and today I'm going to give you the rundown on Song for War, the Mediterranean Theater. This is a new war game coming out by Invicta Rex. It is actually 4 games in one box. We're going to go over the big main game, and then I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown on the other variants that you can play in the box. The base starting scenario is the April 1943 full theater. That's the board you see here. It's not quite in setup mode. This is at the very end. Tim and I just got done with our playthrough. I won, so that's always good. And this is kind of what it looked like when we finished up. But the way the game breaks down is it's played over a series of stages, either 6 stages if you're starting with the 1942, which starts earlier, or the 1943, which is the base one, starts in 1943, and there's 4 stages that you will be playing through, alternating with who announces their moves and actions first, starting with the Allies and then the Axis, and then in round 4 you switch and do the Axis first and the Allies, and then back and forth until the game is over. The game is played through a series of movement steps for the most part, and the player aid, this thing is amazing. This is going to be your lifeblood as you play the game, as it gives you a breakdown of all of your movement steps when things move, and then after each movement step, you'll check to see if there are battles, and all the battle steps are all broken down on this side. On the other side, you're going to have the all your information you need for all of your units, your air units, your sea units, your land units, what kind of armor they have, meaning what type of a die roll you have to use, a white die, gray die, or black die, or in some cases purple, which those are upgraded ones later on. And then it also tells you what it takes to kill them and what they are allowed to hit and what types of combat they're allowed to participate in, because some units only attack air units, some units only attack ground units, and all of that is broken down here. It also has a nice breakdown on the other side, right next to that, where it talks about all of the unit's special abilities. And on the back of the board, it has a breakdown of what all the special abilities do. And then it also has all the 4 different setups that you'll have when it comes time for setting up the board. Make sure that you're setting up the correct scenario when you go to play. Don't be trying to set up the Italy scenario when you're trying to play the 1943 scenario. You're not going to do very well. Going through the different movement steps, movement step 1, they break down the movement steps in a way that the faster units get to move sooner and more often than the slower units, and that's the way a lot of it is, the whole game, it kind of takes place. And to me, that seems very thematic. And so in movement step 1, you would move their fastest units where it looks like your fighters. So your fighter planes would get to move. Fighters can move up to 4 spaces, and then you can move your subs, and they can move up to 3 spaces. So you would just take your fighters from wherever they're at, and you can move them 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces away, wherever you want to move them, and you can either move them into a fight if you like to fight. If you're going to start a fight, you're going to denote that by placing a combat marker in that zone. And that, just as a reminder, by the time you're done moving all of your movements, you'll go back and find everywhere where you put a marker down, and then you're going to resolve that combat there, and you'll be pulling those markers off as you resolve those combats. Going through a combat, so if you move something into a space, you then go through all the battle steps, and you'll check what units are there and available to participate in that battle. So if I move a fighter into a location with an anti-aircraft gun, that's the first thing that's going to happen. The anti-aircraft is going to take its shot, try to shoot those planes down. If it misses, it moves to the next battle step, which will be battle step 2. That's when the fighters attack. So those fighters will attack other air units that are present, as fighters only fight against other air units as they try to dogfight and take each other out. After that stage, if there are any light bombers or heavy bombers in the area, they would then get to attack. While it wasn't part of their movement step, if they are in a zone where a battle is taking place, they are allowed to participate. And you can only participate in 1 battle per movement step. Next up in the battle step, you'd be checking to see if there's any destroyers or submarines. then followed by the rest of the ships and artillery would then get to shoot, because that is the first ground unit participating in it, followed by all of your tanks and soldiers. And once all those are done, any sea or air transport units would then be landed onto shore or dropped out of the sky, and then that would be the end of the battle step. And then you would move to the second movement step. The second movement step, you're going to be moving your destroyers, and you're going to move your sea transports, and then all of your planes will move. So you can load troops up onto your sea transports and move them up to 3 spaces. You can move destroyers along with your transports. Then they can escort. They have an escort ability, so if you have a destroyer with your sea transport, it allows it to move faster, which is good for getting your troops around. And then you get to fly all your planes then. Your fighters get to move again because they're really fast. Light bombers, heavy bombers, and your air transports. Air transports can transport up to 3 troops, and all that again is broken down on your player board very nicely. And then you can drop those troops off. They get to move 7 spaces, so you get to fly pretty much anywhere you want on the board and drop some troops off. So that's a nice way to sneak up on people. But then again, after you're done moving all those, if you move them into an area where you have a combat, you would place a combat marker in that area, and then you would get to conduct a combat there. In addition to those units that are fighting in that area, you could have supporting units. So if you have an artillery in an adjacent unit, or a battleship or a cruiser, something that's within range, and the range again is denoted on your player board. It's one of the special icons on there. That can supporting fire and help that fight. So it's like, like a battleship would give you a support shot into a fight, or a artillery could shoot before your other stuff gets in there to attack. So it's just something that the range units can do, supporting from afar. After all of your ships move, then you're going to move on to more of the land units. You can do your anti-aircrafts, your artilleries, your land transports, your tanks, and your troops. All of them get an opportunity to move, and then again, you would go through all your battle steps to make sure that, and resolve any battles that have occurred when those guys move. Then the tanks, land transports, and soldiers get to move again, and they would get a chance to move again and then create more battles and go through all the battle steps. And then once all that is done, you get one final movement for all of your aircraft to then try to return to a friendly landing strip, or be destroyed if there's no place to land. But hopefully you've managed to get either an aircraft carrier or take some territories enough to where you can land all of your planes and save them at the end of the round. That first phase is called the tactical phase. That's where all the tactics are happening. You're moving, you're fighting, you're doing all those things. Once all that is done, you will check your victory condition to see if you have won. The victory conditions are calculated up with these handy dandy little tokens. Hopefully they keep this going. This is a prototype. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but this is a prototype. And each city has a point value. So depending on what cities and that you have captured, you'll have the appropriate token for that city, and that will line up across this spot here at the bottom of the board. And as you line all of those up, if you manage to have enough of them to hit your victory condition at the end here, which is 44 for the good guys. I have a hard time saying that because I played the Axis this time around, but they were the good guys. And then that would mean that you would win. This is when you would win, because there have been plenty of times where you might take some territories during one movement step and have enough points to win. But if you don't hold those territories all the way until the end of all those movement steps, then it doesn't count as a victory, because victory is not checked until the victory phase, which happens after all of the tactical. After the victory phase is checked, if nobody has won, you move to the national support phase. Each country is going to receive 2 of these national support tokens, and then you're going to draw 2 cards from the top of your deck, and those cards are going to be lots of different things. They can be counterintelligence, where you're moving enemy things around. They can be insurgencies, where you're getting to place units where you normally wouldn't get to place them. They can be upgraded mosquito bombers or panzer tanks or things like that were actual Spitfires. The B-17 flying fortress, oh my gosh, those things are difficult to get rid of. Different things that actually were thematic during the war. That's your chance to pay and upgrade your units to those different types of units, or also, like I said, do different events that might help you swing the battle one way or the other. Once each country will draw them simultaneously. The active country that was active that turn was going first. So in the first round, it's America and Britain. They would choose and announce theirs first, and then the other team would choose and announce theirs. Then those things would take effect. And then after that is done, you go to the resupply phase. The resupply phase is where you're going to be adding more troops to the board. And the way the resupply phase works is you're basically going to get one instance of land resupply, one instance of air, and one instance of sea. And you can choose where amongst the places you want to, that you control, where you would like to do that at. On the board, you can see all those things denoted by the star, which represents a land unit, the wings, which represent the air units, and the anchor, which represents the sea units. And you don't have to do all of them in the same spot. So you could do land units in Tunis, you can do sea units in Naples, and you can do air units in Benghazi if you control it. So you don't have to do resupply in the same spot every time. You can pick and choose where you want to, and that's one of the national support cards. Some of those allow you to resupply in an additional area, things like that, or resupply with a higher amount, because the number that's listed there is basically its capacity for creating units. And on your handy dandy player aid, there is a cost listed next to each unit as to how much it costs of that resupply to create it. So if you have a resupply in a spot of 12 and the tanks take 4, you could put 3 tanks there, or you could do 2 tanks and 4 infantry, because the infantry costs 1 each. And so that's just kind of like a unique way to distribute units all around the board by not having to just do it in one place all the time. You can do them in pretty much any place you would like to. Upgraded units do tend to come with increased costs, so make sure you keep an eye on your national support cards and make sure that the C that might be listed on one of those cards is kept in mind when you go to buy them, because C is your cost. That's what the C stands for. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to resupply is supply lines. It's a little tough to tell on this map. It's a prototype. We did point this out to them, and they said they were going to do something to make it stand out more. But if you look, so Britain has this Alexandria, and that is one of their home territories here. And you can see this line of different colored territory, different colored sea territories that go through there. That's the supply line to Malta. If for some reason, like I am right now, I have Italian units with the flag symbol on it, which means they can basically control territory, that's going to reduce the amount of supply that Malta can get. So if Malta says they can supply 6 land units there and 8 air units there, if I have 2 of ships with flags on them, that's going to reduce both of those numbers by 2. So now it becomes a 4 and it becomes a 6. So fewer units can be placed there because I'm interrupting the supply lines. And that's one of the unique things that Song for War does, is it introduces the supply lines. And you see a lot of that in the North Africa version, which I'll touch on a little bit. You have these units that are the land transports, and you can flip them over and they basically become a hub. And those hubs are used to keep your troops in supply. And if you're not within supply, you can't move those troops. They just get kind of stranded because somebody might come by, bomb your hub. Now those troops have no oil, so you can't move your units. You don't have any food to move for your soldiers. So thankfully you don't die of starvation or anything like that. It doesn't mean that those troops can't do anything because they're now out of supply. And it's just something to keep in mind and something that you have to watch. But in this scenario, the big thing is the supply lines. And so you see how there's like a little hash mark here. That just denotes that there's basically 2 supply lines kind of crossing over each other. So this is like an important spot because so if I have Italy and I have control down here, if I'm trying to supply this, I have to control that sea route in order to get the full amount of resupply value they have on there. Now I don't necessarily have to have anybody there. Empty is fine, but I need to keep my opponent from being in those supply lines in order to maintain a full supply rate. One of the other unique things that this game has is hidden fleets. So there's these spaces all around the board. There's 4 of them, 1 for each country. And what you can do is some nations will start with a hidden fleet. They'll have units that are placed there at the beginning of the game. And then on the back of your player board, it'll say to pick. Let me find that real quick. It's on the back of the other one, of course. So it says Hidden Fleet. It's got all the stuff that's listed there, so all that will be placed in that location. And then your starting location is one of these three spaces. So you'll choose one of those three spaces, dial this dial to that. It's got a letter on one part, a number on the other, and then you put it face down, and that's denoting where that hidden fleet is located. And then at any time, you can reveal that hidden fleet is there, and then move all those pieces to that place, and now they're there, and they have to deal with that. And that, I think, is super unique. You can also move that if you want to. So once it's there, during movement step 3, since movement step 3 is all of your ships, you can move your hidden fleet up to the number of spaces equal to your slowest ship. So if your slowest ship is a 3, then you can move it up to 3 spaces. So you just kind of say, okay, if I'm at E2 here, I can move it 1, 2, 3 to H3. So you would just change that to, let me turn it here to H3, and then you put it back down. And basically, since you picked it up and turned it, they know you moved your hidden fleet. They don't know where to until you reveal it. And I think that is super unique. You can also create a new hidden fleet during your turn. When it comes time to do your supply, you would just set your dial to where you put that, where you're deploying that hidden fleet at. Put your hidden fleet on your spot there, and there you go. And then you can move that later on or surprise somebody with it later. And there is a limit. You can only have up to, I believe it was, 3 to 10 ships. So I think it's more than 10 ships. 10 ships. It gets too big, and they're like, oh, obviously you're right over there. But anywhere between 3 to 10 ships, you can deploy them. That becomes a hidden fleet, and then you can do shenanigans with that, and that's always entertaining. I love hidden movement type of stuff. It's very, very unique to this game. So one of the other things that this game does is all of these pieces, they're laser cut wood. When I say prototype, I would assume they do something similar, maybe plastic, might stay with wood, but they are two-sided. So it reduces the number of actual pieces in the game, but it makes it super convenient to get stuff. And it also, not only does it have a shadow, like a silkscreen printing on there, but it's going to have a letter which tells you what that is. So there's no confusing, like the biggest thing is the ships and the planes, right? See, it's obvious to tell, like, oh, that's a tank, that's a soldier. Those are easy to tell apart. But when it comes to the boats and you're looking at, a submarine, or you're looking at a destroyer, or you're looking at a cruiser or a battleship, it might be a little tricky, but battleship has a B on it, cruiser has a C on it, so it makes it super easy to tell them apart, which is nice. And then, like I said, if it has a flag on it, that means that they can take territories, like tanks. Tanks can take territories, planes cannot. There is no flag on them. The ships will interrupt the passageways, like I was talking about earlier. And then some of the ships will have these little anti-aircraft symbols on them, which means that they basically have anti-aircraft built into the ship, so you don't have to actually have an anti-aircraft unit. It just has one. So if a plane were to come in there to attack, you would get to roll for an anti-aircraft shot for every one of those symbols you have in that fleet that's being attacked. I'm going to go through a quick breakdown on what each of the types of units can do, their movement, their cost, and their special abilities. First off, we have the air transport. An air transport can move up to 7 spaces, and they have an armor value of white, which is the weakest. So meaning that any unit that rolls a white or higher, meaning a white, gray, or black, can hit and destroy that unit. It can carry up to 3 troops, and it costs 3 of your air deployment to put out. Next up, we have our fighters with the F. A fighter can move up to 4 spaces. It also has a white armor value, and it only attacks air units at a value of a 7. So when you roll a 12-sided die, any number of a 7 or higher will hit. If you roll a 12, it has a special ability of precision hit. So typically, when you're in combat and you get a hit, the defender gets to roll where they want to take those hits. But with the precision hit ability, you get to choose which plane gets shot down. It costs 2 to make each fighter. The light bomber also can move 4 and also has an armor rating of white. It will defend at a 10 or higher against, with a white die, against air units. When it's defending against land or attacking against land or sea, it's going to roll a gray die and hit on a value of 8 or higher. If you manage to roll a 12, it will upgrade its damage, meaning instead of attacking it with a gray die, it becomes a black hit instead of a gray hit, which means it can take out a larger unit. It also has the sonar capabilities, which means it can attack submarines, and it has the search ability, which means before or after its move, it can search for the hidden fleet. So you can just ask if there's a hidden fleet in that location, and they have to tell you yes or no. But all that must be done before any battles have been any battles have begun. Like that'd be one of the first things you did before you start resolving any battle steps. Finally, for the planes, we have the heavy bombers. The heavy bombers can move 7. They also have an armor rating of white. They defend with a white die at an 11 against air units, not very good, but against ground units, they don't defend at all. They do, however, roll 5 gray dice and hit at a 9 or higher. So it's a little bit high number, but 5 dice for each one plane that you attack with. And they have what we call exploding dice. So if you roll a 12 with a heavy bomber, you get to roll another die. And as long as you keep rolling 12s, you can keep rolling another die. And so basically you can just accumulate those gray hits, which can really shred through some units. They can also conduct a strategic bombing run. The strategic bombing runs are going to reduce the resupply value of territories. So instead of attacking the units in the territory, you can do a bombing run and try to reduce the units. So if you're trying to take one of the territories and you don't want them resupplying there at the end of the turn so you can hit it next turn, then you can do a bombing run on that location to try to minimize the amount of units they can deploy there. Next up, we have our sea units. So first and foremost, at the very top of the list, we have our sea transports. Sea transports can only move 3 and have an armor value of white, and they don't even defend themselves, but that's okay. They can carry up any 4 land units that you would like to load up on them, and they have the land bridge ability. The land bridge ability allows you to move land units. Basically, like I said, it uses it like a bridge to cross from one land territory to another land territory, using that sea transport as just a bridge to cross over it. Next up is the submarine. I think these won me the battle last time when I was playing against Tim. They only move 3, and they have an armor value of white, and they only attack naval units with a white die with a value of 9 or higher, but they do have the ability to, when you roll a 12, it will upgrade the damage, so it'll go from white to gray. And when you combine that with their ambush ability, which means if you don't move during the movement step that triggered this battle step, they get to upgrade from a white die to a gray die, meaning that 12 on that gray die can then be a black hit, which can take out a battleship or an aircraft carrier that's being stubborn, which they were being very stubborn. They also have the search ability, like the light bombers from earlier, and they have the submerged ability. So that means if you do not have sonar on what you're attacking with, you cannot hit them. So you only, like light bombers and destroyers that have sonar, have the ability to take the submarines out. Next up is the destroyer. So the destroyers can move 4. They have an armor value of white, and they attack and defend with a white die at an 8 or higher. They also have the upgraded damage ability, which, what do you name of that? There's no actual name for it. It's just upgraded, just an arrow on there, and that just means they upgrades the damage. So if you roll a 12, it goes from a white hit to a gray hit. They have sonar, meaning they can attack the submarines. They have the escort ability, which means if you have a sea transport with that sea transport can move the extra space as the destroyer is escorting them. They also have the ability to lay mines. In the movement step 2, when you're moving your destroyers, you can deploy mines in the sea. Mines have a gray attack value at 6 or higher. So whether you place it in the sea with your destroyer or on land, which we'll get to later, when a unit moves into a space with a mine, the mines will detonate one at a time with a gray die value of 6 or higher, and will continue to detonate until either all the mines have gone off, you run out of units that are coming in. That's basically the only thing. They'll keep going off. So as you have units that are coming in, you have more mines, they keep exploding. You have 6 mines, I believe it is, to place before you run out. Once they're out, they're on the board until they explode, and then you can take them back, and then you can place them out later on. Next up is the cruiser. The cruiser has a movement of 4, a gray armor rating, and it rolls 2 dice. It rolls a white die and a gray die when it comes to fighting against land and sea units. It has the special ability of the upgraded damage, so if you roll a 12 on the white or a 12 on the gray die, it will upgrade whichever one you to the next higher tier of damage rolls. It has a range of 1, meaning that it can attack a space away. It can also support, like we talked about earlier, support units a space away. And it has an anti-aircraft gun on it automatically. So if a plane were to try to fly over that space or into that space, it would get shot at by the anti-aircraft on your cruiser. Next up is the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier has a movement value of 3, and it has either a gray or black armor rating, depending, which we'll go over. It starts out at gray, but you can upgrade it. It attacks and defends at a 9 against sea units and air units. It has the +1 ability, which means if you roll a 12, you get to roll another die and continue rolling. It has 3 anti-aircraft guns on it. So meaning if you fly there with a plane, that's going to be 3 shots at that plane before your plane has a chance to act. It can also hold other planes. So you can land light bombers on it, or you can land fighters on it. If you land a fighter on it, it has the coverage ability, and that coverage ability changes that gray armor rating to a black armor rating just by landing a plane on that aircraft carrier. Finally, in the sea units, we have the battleships, the Big Daddy. They move 3. They have an armor rating of black, meaning they're very hard to get rid of. They roll 2 dice when it comes to combat. They roll a black die at a value of 8 or higher and a gray die at a value of 6 or higher. And they can attack land units and Navy units. They have the upgrade ability as well, meaning if you roll a 12, it upgrades the damage rating, which that's where the purple comes into play. And if you, on the bottom corner of your player aid, it does give you a casualty like breakdown. So 1 purple hit is equal to 2 black hits, or 3 gray hits, or 4 white hits. And then you would just subtract the amount of units depending on the armor rating value for those. It has a range of 2, so it can fire up to 2 spaces away. So it's very helpful with your support shots and things like that, and assisting your other fights you have going on. Finally, we have our land units. Our land units start with the land transport. Your land transport has a movement of 3, an armor rating of white. They do not attack or defend, but they can carry units with them. So they can carry up to 3 infantry plus 1 artillery or anti-aircraft gun. You can flip them over to create those supply hubs that was discussed earlier. And they also have the mobile ability. And what the mobile ability does for you is typically when you're using like an air transport or a sea transport, those units don't get offloaded until the very end of the battle step. But with the mobile ability, that allows to pick up the units and take them and drop them off right away, and they're allowed to participate in the battle in which that got moved up in, instead of having to wait until the next movement step to participate in a fight. So it basically lets you unload faster than you normally would with the other 2 transport types of units. Next, we have the classic infantry. Cost you 1, armor rating of white. He hits other land units at a 9 or higher with a white die, so he's pretty basic. He does, though, have the upgrade ability to where if you roll a 12, it upgrades from a white to a gray, so that's very helpful. He also has high ground, meaning that if he's in a mountain, he gets a bonus as well. And he has engineer, which means he can then place mines, and he can, in the Italy version, for example, destroy bridges and things like that, which can become very important. He also, importantly, has the flag. And the flag meaning he can take territories, whereas the light transport, no flag, he can't just drive a truck in there and control that territory. You would have to have an infantry. Or you have one of these next units that we have, which is the tank. Tank has a flag on it, meaning that he can control territories. He has a gray armor rating. He moves 3. He attacks and defends with a gray dice at a value of 7 or higher against other land units. He has the upgrade ability as well, so rolling a 12 on that gray die means it's a black hit, which makes it do more damage. They do, however, have the heavy attribute, which means they are not allowed to enter mountain spaces, which makes sense. You don't see a lot of tanks driving up the mountain ranges. So while it is slightly restricted with that, they are very strong. Next up, on the back side of that, you have the artillery. The artillery, they have a movement of 2. They do have to be deployed, though. So that's another one of those hindering abilities where if you move it during that movement step, you can't attack with it right away because it takes a second to set it up before you can fire with it. They do have an armor value of gray, and they attack land and sea units at a value of 8 or higher on a gray die. If you roll a 12 with them, you get to roll an extra die, and it explodes, and you keep rolling more and more of those. And then they have long range, which is very handy. So if you move an artillery into a mountain range, you can use that to extend your range by 1. So typically they only have a range of 1. If you have an artillery in a mountain, they now have a range of 2. Lastly, we have our anti-aircraft. The anti-aircraft move 2. They have an armor value of 1, and they only shoot at air units. So if land units are coming in, the anti-air are just going to sit there. They will get hit. They don't take territories. They have no flag on them, so they can't hold a territory. But they do have the precision ability, meaning if you roll a 12, you get to pick what you shoot. And Tim kept hitting my bombers. I had heavy bombers and a bunch of other planes, and he just kept taking my heavy bombers out the whole game. So sharp shooting with those anti-aircraft guns can be very hurtful. That's all the units that they have in the game so far, at least, other than the specialty units that can be unlocked with your national support cards. I'm not going to go into each one of those. Reading the card will kind of explain the card as you get those. And anytime that one of the rules on a national support card would contradict a rule on the player aid or in the book, the rule on the cards supersedes that. So basically it kind of allows you to break the rule a little bit because you have an upgraded unit that just was invented and allows you to do special things. So a couple other small minutiae that I'm going to go over is a few things here. So first we have the push-through mechanism. So if I have a aircraft carrier and somebody is trying to fly their plane over my space where I have an aircraft carrier that has a legitimate shot at an air unit, I get to take that shot. It's basically like an attack of opportunity type of thing. So if they're trying to push through there, it doesn't declare a battle. It's resolved right away. So if they declare their movement and they go 1, 2, 3, before they can move out of that space, I would roll my 3 dice to take my shots at them. And then if that plane survives, it continues moving. If it's destroyed, sorry for your luck. But so that is a thing. So anywhere where you have units that are trying to push through a space where there are enemy units, they're basically subject to an attack by any unit that has a legal shot on them. Also, there's a thing called concentrating fire. So typically, if you're stuck in a spot where all you have are these 2 artilleries, let's say, and they only attack at a gray, and you're trying to hit a battleship, you can do what's called concentrating fire. So you declare concentrating fire when it becomes time for the artillery's turn, but then you do not take that shot during the normal step. Everybody else continues to resolve their fighting, and then at the after battle step 6, your shot will then go off as you concentrate that fire. You would roll your hits, and as long as both of them hit, that would automatically upgrade that damage from what it was, which would have been gray in our example, to black. And that's a way to take out stronger units, as you have multiple units trying to concentrate that fire at another unit. They also have supporting fire, which I did go over a little bit. That's the attacking at the range. So let's say we've got 2 battles of troops that are fighting. If there is an artillery like a space away or a battleship that's a space away, they can support fire by shooting in there. Even it might not be their normal battle step, they get to support fire. Movement step. They still get to support fire and participate in that battle as they can support fire, which is what it's called. The other last type of specialty attack or battle that I'll go over is going to be the landing defense. So if you have an air transport or if you have the sea transport, when you go to drop those troops off, if you don't already have that area contested or you have a beachhead established already, basically, those landing units are going to be subject to enemy fire. So those units are going to take a volley of enemy fire before they're able to establish their beachhead and land on there. But once you have a beachhead established, then you're able to bring your troops in and land them. They technically still don't get dropped off until the end of the battle step when during the landing defense phase, but they won't be subject to those attacks because you already have that beachhead established. So I mentioned earlier about the engineering ability of the infantry units being able to destroy bridges and place mines. They also can form a defensive line. So on the back side of the mine tokens, they have the defensive lines. And so you would place this on a border next to an area that you control, and then any unit moving in or trying to fly over is going to suffer what it says on the token itself. So you would have 2 rolls at a 9 and one with white, and then 1 gray 8 or higher attack. And there's also has anti-aircraft. So there's a plane trying to push through to get to that territory to fight it. Crossing over that border, you're going to get that shot at it before it has a chance to attack everything. And you can place those against a sea border, so anybody trying to make an amphibious assault is also going to be subject to those attacks. And it's just a nice way to build up your defenses if you know there's attacks, impending. So those infantry can then, you get more bang for your buck out of your infantry units. And that's the basic rundown on how to play the game. I know there's a kind of a lot there to absorb, but that information should be enough to get you rolling and playing, or at least giving you an idea of how the game structure flows. This is the main board. There's 2 boards here put together. This gives you the 1942 and the 1943 Mediterranean theater, depending on if you want to play the 1 through 6 or 3 through 6, depending on the game length you're looking for. These boards, when you separate them and flip them over, have 2 separate maps that provide a shorter battle seat for depending on what you want. There's the Battle for North Africa, which is probably the shortest one, where the hubs come into play and the supply lines. And then there's also the Italy, where you have a lot of hidden deployment, which I'm excited to try that one out. I haven't had a chance to try that one out yet, but it does look very interesting, as there's these different numbered locations on the boot, as it were. And then you've got these locations on the side of the board, kind of like the hidden fleet. And you have numbered tokens that you would then put face down. You put units in those spots, and then you put the token down on them. And then whenever you would like, you could then flip that token over and say, I have troops right there. Put those troops out there because they're laying in ambush. They're waiting. You don't know where they're at. And that's also the map that has the bridges, and that sounds very interesting to try to, do I blow the bridges up so I get free attacks as they try to cross that territory, or do I leave the bridges in place so I can move my troops up there quicker? I'm excited to try that one. But for the most part, that is Song of War, a Mediterranean theater by Invicta Rex. I hope you found this video informative. And if you did like this, if you haven't yet, Tim and I did a preview video where we give a lot of our thoughts and opinions on the game and how we feel about it. We also have a 4 to 5 hour full playthrough of this map here, where you can see how this map ended up the way it is now. If you have the time to sit through that, it was very entertaining. I feel like it was a lot of fun. So big swings, fast and sloppy, as we like to call it. We didn't sit there and pine over decisions and take forever to go. We're just like, make some moves. Let's check it out. Let's try it. And we just moving our guys around and did it. So please give that one a view if that sounds good to you. For the Board Game Rundown, I've been Bob. This has been Song of War, and thanks for watching.